75-year-old California landlord rented out her mansion to two tenants, and they turned her house into a party house, causing over $100,000 worth of damages. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and it's coming out of the state of California, and it's a little bit different story than what I usually cover because this has to do with a mansion, okay? A mansion that a small landlord is renting out, and you know what? They ended up with a bad tenant, and this is the kind of situation that can happen to anybody, but we see it on a much larger scale when we're talking about a multi-million-dollar property in the state of California. So, you know what? The same issues that small landlords such as myself and other people who deal with much lower cost properties deal with, hey, guess what? Those mansions, they face the exact same issue. So when you decide to rent your property out, this is why it is so important to do proper tenant screening, to verify, incomes, to make sure that all the checks and balances are put into place so that you don't end up in a situation like this landlord here. So this landlord ended up having her house turned into a party house. And yeah, lots and lots of damage, lots of problems, and I hate to see this sort of thing happen to anybody regardless of the fact that she was already very well to do. It still sucks. It still deters people from wanting to become landlords, and you know what? It's not helping anything. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So here's a question I have. The question I have for you today is, what is the cost of the single most expensive property that you have rented out? Okay. Now, obviously, I am not a multi-millionaire living in a mansion somewhere. Okay. The most expensive property that I rent out, I own 4 single-family rentals right now, and it's valued at just under $400,000. Okay. So I don't expect to get a bad tenant. I'm sure I will in that property eventually, but hopefully they never turn it into a party house. Anyway, let me get into this article. We'll talk about the details of this story. This article is coming from Realtor.com, and it says, "My nightmare tenant turned my home into a mega mansion party house. Don't let it happen to you." And that's exactly why I'm reading this article. I don't want it to happen to you. Whether your house is worth 50 grand or 50 million, you shouldn't have a tenant destroy it. So anyway, let's see what the article says. A California homeowner had been renting out her unique property for decades with no issues until she met the tenant from hell. The nightmare turned a quiet Los Angeles neighborhood into the scene of wild mega mansion parties that you see on the news, with hundreds of young people carousing at all hours of the night and aggressive dogs prowling the property. It also cost Sherry Woods almost $100,000 in damages since July and placed her under an untold amount of stress. "I'll never rent it out again," she tells Realtor.com. "What happened to me is what every landlord dreads." So the first thing I want to mention is, hey, California has some of the most strict anti-landlord laws in the entire country. So you put a bad tenant in your property, even if it's a mansion, like in this case here, and it will still be very difficult to get them up out of there, even if they are throwing these wild parties. Now keep in mind that the majority of people who are evicted for non-payment of rent. And if these people were continuing to pay the rent, well, you know what? It might be pretty hard to get them out of there. I don't know yet. Let me see if the article says if she was able to file eviction against them. Woods started renting out her unique Calabasas area home to 2 men in the entertainment industry who were referred to her through a local and reputable real estate agency. She met only one of the men in person, but he seemed real nice. The 75-year-old bought the home in 1992 for $200,000 and then spent 30 years renovating it into a unique tropical paradise with a fire pit, an outdoor tiki bar, a small pool, and a hot tub. The property consists of a main house and 4 smaller dwellings, which are individually themed. Wood started renting out the property on Airbnb when the vacation property portal was still in its infancy. Before I knew it, they were renting out my houses every night. I was making money hand over fist, she says. So this is really a multi-family, okay? So you have the main house and then four smaller houses that are still on the same property, even though she bought it back in 1992 for $200,000. Remember how much property values in California have increased over the years, and it becomes obvious this is a multi-million-dollar property at this point, especially considering how much she is personally invested into it. So I feel like, you know what, Airbnb was probably one of the better ways for her to make her money back. This became a nightmare. So, you know, when I read the title, I was thinking, okay, this is, you know, rented out to a long-term tenant, but from the sound of it now, it might be that these are people who rented out an Airbnb and, you know, basically destroyed the place. But I don't know. Let me continue. And while Woods had a good 13-year run in the short-term rental market, the COVID-19 pandemic made it near impossible to hire cleaners, and Woods had to do the cleaning herself. Then her mother, who was in her 90s, became ill, and California began cracking down on short-term rentals. It got to be too much, she says. Woods decided then to put the property on the market and retire to Las Vegas. But an agent approached her with another solution. Why not rent out her property while she waited for the right buyer? The property is listed for $1.9 million. Hoping to save on costs, she hired the agent to find the perfect tenant. Okay, so now that's a little bit better explanation. So it was a short-term rental, but now it's a long-term rental. She's just renting out long-term until she's able to get, you know, the full, you know, nearly $2 million that she's asking for it. And that's when these bad tenants moved up in there. Okay, so I'm reading the story for the first time as I'm reading it to you. So forgive me if I'm a little bit confused about the whole situation. But from what this sounds like, it's a nightmare. It's a perfect nightmare. Let me see exactly what happened after she decided to rent it out long term. With home prices at all-time highs and mortgage rates still hovering around 6 to 7%, many homeowners are turning to the rental market to offset their costs. But with that comes some risks, and sometimes relying on a platform like Airbnb or a real estate agency to vet your tenants isn't enough. Woods, who put her property up for rent at $7,000 a month, was at first skeptical of the two men who expressed interest in renting it. Unless you have a hit TV show, you're broke, she says. But the real estate agent assured Woods the men's income checked out. Then, one of the men personally delivered a $14,000 security deposit in cash. I sat there counting all that money, and that should have been the first red flag, says Woods. Yeah, that's a huge red flag. I don't accept cash, period. Does not work for me. Oh, here's the security deposit, and as they bring $100 bills, no, I'm not taking cash from you, okay? Get me a cashier's check. How about that? I don't take personal checks either. We learn our lessons the hard way. But like I said, she's working through a property manager or a real estate agent, so I'm sure she thought to herself, okay, you know, things should be okay. Things should be just fine. No, okay, you need to do your own vetting. And you need to double check everything the real estate agent gave you, because simply put, there's good and bad agents, there's good and bad property managers, and overall we're talking about a $2 million property, and you know, you invested a ton of your own time and money into it, so why put that much money at risk? Even if it's a $50,000 property, why put that much money at risk for a tenant? You don't know these people, so do the best you can to make sure that they are screened. More red flags. Soon, Wood started sleuthing on her new tenants and turned up online news articles that indicated one of the men had been in prison for a serious offense. But given that her new tenant had a common name and also used a stage name, she couldn't positively identify him as the same man. Still, she raised the issue with the real estate agent, whom Realtor.com is not naming. He brushed it off, she says. I'm thinking he's done a background check. He must know what he's talking about. See what I mean? Okay, the real estate agent didn't do a background check on the tenant. It would have easily come up with the criminal convictions, and you could have easily screened that person out. But no! You had a incompetent person who was put in charge. This is part of the reason why a lot of people, they don't like leasing agents, real estate agents, property managers helping them with their rental properties, because so many of them are just bad, just bad. Okay, they just got their real estate license. They don't know what they're doing. They're not renting their own property, so they don't care if they put a bad tenant in there. It's not their money to lose. Okay, once it is leased up, they get paid. They never have to talk to you again. So yeah, this is a nightmare type of situation. And when it comes to a mansion like this, what you should have done is consulted with other people who are renting properties similar to yours out. Okay, figure out who they are using for property management, or you could go it alone. Now I realize you're a 75-year-old lady who lives in another state and owns this property long distance back in California. Maybe that is not a good idea. Maybe the best thing for you would have been just to sell. Okay, now this could happen to anybody. This situation could happen to anybody, and unfortunately it happened to her, but it is a learning lesson for all landlords. Hey, always do your background checks, always do your tenant screening, always check everything. Trust but verify. That's what they say, right? It's just not worth it when you're putting hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into a property to take this sort of risk. Anyway, I'm going to put a link to the article in the description down below. Let me know what you think of this whole situation.